and then I will look at the books that changed my life. And I will also give you some information about how I learned Tatar. When I got interested in the Tatar language, there was no formal classes in the language at all. Then I will talk more about the summer lab at Urbana-Champaign. That really changed my life in many ways. And I will expand more on learning Tatar in Russia. And I will show you pictures of my trip to the village of Yerushevo in Tatarstan. And that is kind of has been central to my work. And toward the end of the talk, I will give you some advice about how to learn and also how to maintain fluency in the Tatar language, or maybe in other languages, despite the war in Ukraine. So now let's start this journey through time and places. So why did I get interested in the Turkic world? On this slide, you see a map of Brittany and a map of the of Crimea and the Ottoman Empire. So what is the connection between Brittany in France, Crimea, and the Ottoman Empire? So I have long had an interest in the history of minorities, partly for family reasons. My mother was originally from Brittany, a Celtic region, united to the Kingdom of France in the 16th century. Her family spoke Breton, a Gaelic language, and my father was the product of two revolutions, the Russian Revolution and the Kemalist Revolution in Turkey. So my grandfather on my father's side, who fought in the White Army, spoke Russian and the Turkic Karaim language, which is close to Crimean Tatar. And my grandmother, who spoke Ottoman Turkish, was exiled at the age of 12 to France. At home, we spoke only French, but I was exposed to family history through family lore, Russian emigre visitors of different ethnic backgrounds, and pictures hanging on the walls of our apartment near Paris. I was constantly reminded that we had a Breton language poet on my mother's side, that my ancestors on the Karaite side used to guard the Tatar Khan's treasure when the Khans left for battle, and that my ancestors on the Ottoman side built a vast empire that displayed great tolerance toward religious minorities. If I had been born in an Armenian family, my perspective obviously would have been quite different. On one picture hanging on the wall of our apartment, I could see myself, a toddler holding my aunt's hand as she wore the traditional Breton headdress. And on another, I could admire my grandmother, Rabia Nilüfer Sultan, in a beautiful dress at Dolmabahce in Istanbul, before her father, Abdul Mejid's grandson, was sent to exile. In our living room, Auguste Raphael's 19th century gravures drew me to the land of Crimea with these beautiful minarets every time I daydreamed instead of doing my homework. Besides these pictures, two books changed my life. when I turned 13, my mother gave me a book to read. Comment peut-on être breton? That is, how can one be Breton? And this book was written by Morvan Lebesgue. And this book was an eye-opener and revealed to me that there was more than just one history, and that French heroes were not necessarily Breton heroes. In short, history could be told in different ways. Later, my father brought me another book authored by Alexandre Bennigsen, the internationally renowned specialist on Islam in the Soviet Union. Both authors, Lebesgue and Bennigsen, strengthened my early interest in minority languages and histories. At the age of 9, I was sent to a Russian immigrant school 1 day a week. I was the only child who did not speak Russian, but I managed to impress my teachers because I was the only one completing the homework. Unfortunately, the school closed after 1 year, and I had to wait until 8th grade to take Russian in middle school. Later, I completed my BA in Russian and my master's thesis on the Tatar yoke in the Russian and Soviet historiography at the Sorbonne. At the same time, I took Turkish at the French National Institute of Oriental Languages and Civilizations. But the teaching of languages was dry. Its focus was grammar, which I loved, and translation. But there was not much interest in having students develop oral competency. Because of my interest in Turkic minorities, my MA advisor, Professor Basil Kerbelay, encouraged me to enter the doctoral program under Alexandre Bennigsen at the École des Hautes Études en Sciences Sociales. Professor Bennigsen proposed that I examine Tatar modernism, or Jadidism, which in the 1980s had been unjustly neglected by Islamic studies scholars. I was told that Tatar reformers had established an educational system for men and women, which had no parallel in India, Egypt, or Algeria until after their decolonization. The topic sounded fascinating, but the problem was that my knowledge of Turkish was still limited. For this reason, I first turned to Russian sources and gathered information on the reformist schools, Jadid schools, for my thesis proposal. In 1986, I married Eugene Clay, a PhD student at the University of Chicago, and moved to the United States, which interrupted my doctoral work in France. Nevertheless, on my own, I continued to work in the field of Eurasian studies, using Professor Bennigsen's bibliography of Russian Orientalists and missionaries as a guide. At the Regenstein Library, I found the diary of the Russian missionary Yefimi Malov, who traveled through Christian and Islamic Tatar villages before the rise of the Jadid movement. Missionaries like Malov were mainly concerned about the spread of Islamic literacy among the Christian Tatars, called Kreshen, and the non-Tatar peoples of the Middle Volga. Their observations, although biased, led me to question the Jadid paradigm, which depicted traditional Muslim education as stagnant, as strictly theological, and exclusively male. In fact, traditional Islamic education helped to Islamize animist, Christian, Finno-Ugric, and Turkic peoples, and even some Russians. It also empowered women to become vectors of Islamic learning within and outside their village boundaries. These new converts to Islam established clandestine mosques and schools in officially Christian Orthodox multi-ethnic villages, despite Russian laws that forbade apostasy from Christianity or conversion from any religion of the empire to Islam. When I returned to France to tell Professor Benningsen, now retired, that I was interested in exploring the Christianization and Islamization of the baptized Tatars or Krashen, a minority of a minority, I was gently reminded that Krashen had always been Muslim. In other words, the apostasy movements from Christianity to Islam in the 19th century simply marked the automatic return of the Krashens to Islam and a victory for Tatar resilience against their colonizers. In my view, however, Krashen or Tatar identity was never fixed and defined by national heritage, but was an evolving, often contested, dynamic phenomenon. Various educational, religious, and economic networks played an important role in their adopting one identity or another. But to understand my apostates better, I needed to go beyond my comfort zone, that is the Russian language, and learn Tatar. Malov's diaries refer to Sufi-inspired tales of the prophets, folk tales, epics, and popular didactic works, which have so far excited little interest among historians of Eurasia, despite their importance in molding the Tatar imaginary. I wanted to read what my apostates read or heard so that I could understand better the way apostates responded to Malov's proselytism. While still a graduate student in France, I was not encouraged to learn Tatar, since in the mind of my advisor, pre-revolutionary Tatars wrote in Ottoman Turkish, so why learn modern Tatar? Plus, Tatars speak Russian, why bother? A trip to Urbana-Champaign changed everything. So in 1987 and 1988, I came to the University of Illinois summer program as a French graduate student. There, on my very first day of the lab, Helen Sullivan, the head of the library staff at the time, welcomed me with a big smile and asked about my research. I explained to her that I was interested in Russian missionary efforts to convert Volga Tatars to Eastern Orthodoxy, and she immediately gave me access to the library's microfiche depository of pre-revolutionary journals. But most important, she mentioned to me that the library had Tatar books. Thanks to her, thanks to Helen, I went to the open stacks and started browsing the library's Tatar language holdings. There I discovered excerpts of reprinted pre-revolutionary Tatar sources in the Cyrillic alphabet, which convinced me that pre-revolutionary Tatars did not write in Ottoman Turkish and that I needed to learn the language, even if modern Tatar still differed from the language of the text I meant to explore. But for some reason, I was more drawn to Tatar, the language of a Turkic minority in a Russian milieu, than Turkish, perhaps because some of my ancestors lived in the Turkic-Russian milieu of Crimea. The library offered all the tools I needed: grammars, dictionaries of modern and old Tatar, and pre-revolutionary texts published by the Soviets in the Cyrillic alphabet, which I could read until I mastered the Arabic script. Those texts included pre-revolutionary novels, plays, and newspaper articles on various themes. Thanks to the lab and my earlier exposure to Turkish, I began learning Tatar on my own until Professor Yulay Şamilolu, a native speaker, invited me to study with him for a month at Indiana University. It was a great experience. I will never forget it. Finally, I could hear the language. We read the text I had photocopied from Urbana, and Yulay made me jump into Tatar text written in the Arabic script. It was quite a push, and I had to learn to swim quickly. Later, thanks to Yulay, I was able to give my first paper in the US at a conference he organized, and I met my very first living Tatars from Kazan, with whom I could not speak Tatar yet. However, 3 years later, in 1992, I was able to reconnect with the same scholars, this time in Tatar, after I had spent a few months in St. Petersburg, where I met Tatars at the Tatar Public Center. So thanks to the Tatar community of St. Petersburg, I was able to meet Tatars from Kazan and Orenburg, who patiently helped me develop my oral skills. With one of them, we exchanged the French lessons for Tatar lessons. In general, the challenge for learning Tatar, and that was obviously for St. Petersburg, but also for Kazan, the challenge for learning Tatar was to find places where people would spontaneously speak Tatar without switching to Russian. At the beginning, switching to Russian could help, but at some point, I needed to find places where the language was spoken spontaneously. So it could be the Tatar public centers, the departments of history, language, folklore at Kazan University. It could be Tatar public schools, for instance. I went and visited a number of schools where I could meet the teachers, and so that was, that gave me great practice. I also visited mosques, and also I would go to these places where they sold Tatar books, so I could talk to people there. I would also go to the Kamal Theater, and of course, I would also meet folklorists, archivists, poets, novelists, teachers, and we would sit and have tea together, and that would give me a great opportunity to practice the language. But I had to find these places so that I could learn to speak. So thanks to all the contacts I gathered in the US, St. Petersburg, and Kazan, finally I was able to go and visit Christian and apostate villages. So definitely the village is a great place to learn and to perfect your language, and because this is a place where Tatars would not switch to Russian when they speak to you. So it gave me great practice there. So I went to the Kreshen and apostate villages, that is the villages that Malov mentioned in his diaries. So these villages had been officially Christian, but had petitioned the imperial authorities to be recognized as Muslim. Although the events I described in my research occurred well before the revolution of 1917, fieldwork gave me a sense of the Middle Volga geography, ecology, and shifting demographics, kinship networks, and also distances between the villages that I was investigating. It gave me an idea about the location of major trade centers in the area, and also some idea about also the proximity of sacred places to the villages that I was investigating. So on this picture, for instance, you see a woman praying at the grave of Sufi Ishan Wali Ahmed. And this is, I took this picture at Kazanchi Begene village. And this village is not too far away from Yelisheva, so they had there was a connection between this Sufi teacher and the village I was investigated in the archives. That is Yelisheva. So here you have a picture of the cemetery there. So his wives, he had 4 wives, and they were buried in this cemetery. So this was a place where people would definitely go and pray there. And in his lifetime, he was a healer, and he Kashans, but also other Turkic and Finno-Greek minorities came to see him. So this is the mosque, his mosque, but at the time in the 1930s, the minaret was toppled. Also, when I visited these villages, I could look at the books that people had in their home, that had kept in their home. In this case, you see that these books were found in the house of the former mullah of the village, and he had hidden all these books in the attic, and they accidentally find the books, but as you can see, they were not in good condition. But you could also find in the villages women's diaries like this one that I would not have been able to find, for instance, if I had worked solely in the archive. And they had these diaries are in different alphabet, Arabic script, the Latin alphabet, and also the Cyrillic alphabet. So these are diaries that women kept at home. They would write prayers, spiritual songs. They would also poems. So it's interesting. I mean, this material has meaning once you know a little bit more about the village itself, the history of the village. So you could find also talismans, for instance, like these ones. And also pictures, I mean, photos, for instance, of these underground mullah, Ibrahim Bik Mohammed. So these are also had the opportunity to visit cemeteries, and so this is the cemetery of Yelisheva. So here are some of the some of the gravestones there. So cemeteries provided, additional information about the time when Islamic literacy became more prevalent. So Arabic prayers or inscriptions on stone meant that people could read these inscriptions. Also, in some ways, by looking at the dates themselves, so you could kind of see when, in some ways, Arabic scripture literacy had spread in the village. So those who could not, for instance, who could not read or write might use their tamgat, that is some sort of signature that they used in the petitions as well. So here that's a sample of these tamgats. Here is it's also in the village of Yerushava. So this is the cemetery also, but that's where the priest and his family, Eastern Orthodox priest and his family were buried. But you can see that all the crosses have been removed, but people still don't want to build anything on that territory, and so the territory is still marked. And it kind of, just by looking at the landscape, the death landscape of Yerushava, it gives you an idea about the story of the place, the struggle between, Eastern Orthodoxy and Islam within the village. So fieldwork also helped me realize that those who chose not to apostatize but stayed in the bosom of the Eastern Orthodox Church were not superficially Christianized, but had a deep sense of their religious identity, despite nationalist Muslim Tatar claims that baptism was forced upon them. So I also visited Christian villages. Here you can see a Tatar Eastern Orthodox Church in Chura, or Christian, I should say, Eastern Orthodox Church in Chura. Here, this is I visited a Christian cemetery. These are here some. I also visited schools. Again, with great practice for Tatar. And then these are young Christian children singing and dancing. So fieldwork made me realize that the past is always present. And if I want to go back to this picture earlier, this is the village of Yerushava, and here you can see the old mosque without the minaret, because the minaret was also toppled. And then you have the new mosque now in Yerushava. Despite the effects of the Bolshevik Revolution, apostate villages, though officially Muslim Tatar today, still bear the mark of their tragic history. Neighboring Tatar villages, for instance, in the case of Yerushava, might occasionally call them Klashen, disparagingly, when disputes arise about the land or local resources. Most important, despite Stalin's anti-religious policies, earlier trends of Islamization and Christianization continued during the Soviet period, through marriage, consolidation of fields and villages, and exclusion of those who did not belong during the famine. It is also worth noting that until the 1950s, marriages still took place within former pre-revolutionary Islamized baptized network. So I could have spent all my time in the archives, but I'm glad that I did not. And indeed, knowing modern Tatar helped me bond with archivists over tea and be taken seriously despite my foreign status and my gender. Additionally, living among Tatars and knowing their language helped me uncover the past. In one instance, in 1996, I was invited to a funerary repast to mark the anniversary of a friend's beloved relative. During this ritual, the gathered community shares a meal, distributes alms in the name of the dead, sings munajat, that is a popular religious songs, and prays for the dead. So they would be using also the kind of diary that I showed you earlier in this presentation. And after this event, you have a picture that I took during this event, and it was for me obviously a place where I could speak Tatar, and I could, but I realized that after this event, as I plunged one more time in Malov's diary, I realized that I had missed clues that the woman in the apostate village of Yerushava also conducted similar Muslim wakes for the dead. And I had not seen it before. That's only because I was invited to this repast in Kazan that I was able to understand what was going on also in Malov's diaries. So my trip to the same village, that is Yerushava, confirmed that the villagers still performed the wakes. Those wakes were particularly meaningful because prayers tied the dead and the living to the Prophet Muhammad, his family, various local Sufi saints, relatives, and neighbors from adjacent or neighboring apostate and baptized villages. So wakes were open to every woman in the village, even those who were hesitant to sign the petition to become officially Muslim. So as in my personal experience of the wakes, during which the participants discussed what it meant for Tatars to live in the so-called Sovereign Republic of Tatarstan, people in Malov's times shared the news about the state of the apostasy movement during the wakes. The wakes were also a rallying movement to Islamize further those who still lived in religious ambiguity. So those who still hesitated between Eastern Orthodoxy and Islam, they were still invited to these wakes. So I hope that I made the case for learning modern Tatar. In June 1920, Tatar was declared the official language of the new autonomous republic of the Soviet Union. In the 1930s, the use of Tatar language was discouraged. Tatars could not have access to university-level education in their native language until Nikita Khrushchev. Tatar children in cities could no longer have access to any form of schooling in Tatar. So as a result, the use of the Tatar declined in urban areas. That's why when I was in Kazan, very often people would switch to Russian very quickly, especially when I was learning to speak Tatar. So I had to kind of tell people, please speak in Tatar to me. So, and also I had to find these places where people would kind of more spontaneously, speak Tatar. So, but in 1992, when I made my first trip to Kazan, the Parliament of Tatarstan adopted policies that succeeded in reversing this decline. A new law made both Tatar and Russian official languages of the Sovereign Republic of Tatarstan. So from 1994, let's say, to 2017, non-Tatar students had to take Tatar as a second language in schools. So this led to the training of many teachers of Tatar as a second language at the University of Kazan, and the creation of new textbooks that instructors in the United States can use as references for their own teaching. In 2017, the teaching of the Tatar language in Tatarstan faced a new setback. The Russian education Ministry replaced the mandatory Tatar language classes of 6 hours by elective classes of 2 hours per week. So this is not good news. However, Tatars have found new ways to maintain student interest and proficiency in their own language. Uh, they have free Tatar language lessons in mosques, extracurricular activities in public schools, Tatar language festivals or summer camps. They also digitized number of Tatar novels, literature. They also on the web you will find all these free audiobooks. They developed podcasts also in their native language, and they have developed also a number of online dictionaries. So and beyond that, they also developed online teaching of the Tatar language. So obviously, the war in Ukraine is a major setback for US students interested in conducting fieldwork in Tatarstan. In my case, I had to rethink my research. I'm currently investigating Soviet Tatar folklore or mythology as a form of eco-religion in Tatar discourse before and after the breakup of the Soviet Union. I rely again on the summer lab at Urbana and the library's rich collection of Soviet Tatar novels. So my other concern is to maintain fluency in Tatar. Where I live, there are no Tatars. And the language can be easily lost without reading and practicing. Providentially, because of the war, there is a growing Tatar Bashkir diaspora in Canada, the US, Turkey, and Finland, eager to preserve their history and language. As I sought to revive the teaching of Tatar at the Critical Languages Institute in Tempe, Arizona, at my university, my institution, Arizona State University. I met Alima Salahuddinova. And Alima has also created online academy of the Tatar language, which is very popular in the Tatar diaspora and among students of all ages. She has also organized summer camps in Canada for the youth. So to some extent, one could say that learning Tatar has been easier. I mean, of course, we cannot go to Tatarstan, but still, it has become easier. When I started teaching the Tatar language program at Arizona State University in 1995, there was not much to rely on. I had to kind of create everything from scratch. There was no much, audio material. But today, there is a wide variety of material available on the web, recordings from Tatar TV, podcasts, YouTube video of Tatar plays or music. And the Tatar community has also developed interactive language programs. And definitely Alima Salahuddinova could help you, access some of this material. And finally, the Critical Language Institute at Arizona State University's Melikian Center in Tempe offers a summer intensive course for Tatar, currently led by Alima. So thanks to ASU institutional support, the institute is quite affordable. It does not charge tuition in state or out of state for its credit-bearing courses. And non-ASU students, high schoolers, retired people can apply for the program. And Alima Salahuddinova is also the best contact, to learn more about the availability of teaching material online, or she can also help you have contacts with the Tatar diaspora. So on these last slides, I know maybe I spoke too long, but I do have some material that you could use if you are interested in learning Tatar. There is a Pope's manual. That's in fact how I started learning Tatar, but it's not, it's in English, okay? It's done by a linguist. So definitely, if you had some exposure to another Turkic language, it will be easier for you to kind of access the material. But there is another Tatar grammar that I would recommend. These grammars really will not teach you how to speak, all right? It's more like passive, more like passive learning here, grammar. And you have Boubiel's grammar. It's great, especially if you are, at a very advanced, the more advanced level, and you are still puzzled by Tatar grammar. This is the place to go. It's very, very thorough and better than Pope. Pope is more like if you had done Turkish or Kazakh and you want to have some kind of general idea about how the grammar works, that's good reading. And Boubiel's grammar is more about once you already have a good a grasp of the grammar and you are reading novels and you're kind of puzzled by some grammatical feature there, you can go to Boubiel and you might find, an answer. And then they have developed, and that did not exist when I started teaching Tatar. So you do have now a Tatar English Tatar dictionary for beginners and even beyond. That's a pretty helpful dictionary for English speakers. And then you have these online dictionaries. So the one that I like best, and that's this one. Because it gives you access to multiple dictionaries, and also the English dictionary as well. But you also have Tatar dictionaries, okay, which means that if you look for a definition of a Tatar word in the Tatar language, you can find that there as well. And also you can access all the vocabulary of Arabic origin or Persian origin also in these dictionaries, which can be quite helpful when you read older texts. Now, in terms of textbook, we don't have anything in, as far I can tell, nothing in English yet. You can start with the Safiuddina, her textbooks, but there are other textbooks out there, okay, since 1998. But there is one in German that is really good. So if you know German, please, use this one. It's really great. In this, there is really targeting, oral competency. So it's a pretty good textbook. And then I have on this slide, you might not have the time to write everything down, but here is just to give you an idea about the kind of material you can find now on the web. You can go to Radio Liberty as I click, and there you find lessons also in different formats. It's great. And you can read also the news in Tatar. They also have very short videos you can watch to learn new expressions in the Tatar language. And then they have all these sites for children, and I enjoy watching them. I'm still a child, I guess, and so you have all these sites, and you can find cartoons and all kinds of programs about how to, I don't know, brush your teeth in Tatar, okay? And then you have all these audiobooks, also free audiobooks on on Tatar. I mean, this Tatar literature. So you can find, for instance, the books in the at Urbana, and then you can find the audiobook. So that way you can read, and at the same time you can hear the language. And you have all kinds of recordings from Tatar TV as well on YouTube. All right, I guess I'm done.
Great, thank you very much. If anyone has questions for our speaker, please feel free to either type them into the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask over the microphone. And I see, Alexei, you have a question, so please go ahead.
Thank you, Professor. We talked 2 years ago. I'm the ethnic Chuvash, and we're discussing critical languages study. So my question is related to the two opposing tendencies in learning Tatar as a minority language in the wake of the Russian full-scale aggression in Ukraine. So thank you for showing the Azatlik resource, AIDA. So last October, when Alsu Kurmasheva was detained by the Russian authorities in Kazan, there was a sort of a sense of panic and fear towards any connections to learning or studying Tatar, because lots of people felt that it's just dangerous. So the opposing tendency, the most recent Russian hit, Boy's Word, Blood on the Asphalt, mainly it is known for its Russian word, made hit waves with the motivation to study Tatar, because two of the songs that were quite popular in this TV series, one was by Aigel, the song is Piala, and Kotulu, made lots of people study Tatar, and even Piala made it to the second place in Shazam app. So those of you who don't know Shazam, I can later on tell you. So how would you assess? Is there a growing motivation to learning Tatar through these popular things? They are not like purely teaching resources. They have nothing to do with what you were listing. Or there is a fear of being connected to the minority languages because it reeks of separatism, and Putin and Naryshkin, the head of the Russian foreign intelligence, was quite often quoting that Tatarstan is one of the examples of separatism, bad separatism. So what's your take on that? Thank you.
Yeah, it's true that, for instance, in parents, for instance, if they have the choice between a Tatar language school, let's say, and a Russian language school, they might choose the Russian language school for their children because they want them to advance also socially. They feel like they will have, a better chance. So definitely there is, we can be quite pessimistic. Yeah, that's right. And that, but at the same time, what I noticed on the web, and that might explain why we have now so much material on the web, is there is a great effort to make material available for parents so that they can at least raise their children bilingual within the family. All right. So, and then the fact that they have developed Russian classes, Tatar language classes in the mosque is also a new phenomenon. But I think that Tatars, I still remember in 1992, even later, how hard it was to learn the language, in the sense, to become fluent in the language. As I said, you really had to look for places where people would speak the language. But as long as there is kind of this idea that, maybe I'm wrong about this, but that the president of, I should know you this, the leader or the head of the Republic of Tatarstan, that there is still this understanding that he's supposed to be bilingual, Tatar and Russian, that there will still be a need for the Tatar language to some extent in the administration. but I understand why we could be pessimistic, definitely, about um, about the future of the language. But at the same time, on the web, I see so much activity that I'm thinking maybe we should not be that pessimistic. I saw families, for instance, where it looked like when I was talking to the children that they knew no Tatar because they would always, speak in Russian. But then I noticed that if they were in a particular environment where they had to, well, where Tatar was used, they would spontaneously speak Tatar. So there had been cases where when I met some Tatars, these Tatars through a friend, this friend was with me, but they used to speak to this friend in Russian. Then when I spoke to them, the Tatar was so bad. I mean, it was like, okay. And then I would meet them, but in a different situation where they used to speak Tatar and their Tatar was wonderful. And so, yeah, I can see that too. But still, I still think it's so important to learn the language so that you can understand, especially if you are interested in the history of the Tatars, is that you can understand better the meaning of the events that you are looking into. I'm not sure I answered your question, Alicia. I want to remain positive about the future of the language. I mean, yeah, it's true. When I went back to Yelisheva, to my surprise, some of the children there who were playing in the streets were playing in Russian, which was not the case in 1992. It was not the case, and there it was something new. And when I visited, when I went, it was in 2018. Yeah, I went to Yelisheva again, and I visited a village close to that, close to Yelisheva, and there they have a school. And I asked whether they taught all subjects in Tatar the way they used to do earlier, even I would say in the 1960s, 1970s. There was still, I mean, the subjects at least in the villages were taught in the Tatar language. But the answer was not anymore. All right, so then it was mainly Russian, and Tatar was almost like studied as a second language. So there, of course, I could be quite pessimistic about the future of the language, but at the same time, I see a lot of effort on the part of the Tatars to maintain fluency. I know a mother, for instance, who is trying very hard to raise her children in the Tatar language, and she herself realized that she had to kind of enrich her speech, all right, so that she can also transfer that to her children. So she started reading in Tatar novels, and she became involved in Tatar language clubs, and so that she can, be a better speaker.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. And I think we have time for one more question if anyone has one. And I see Tim has a hand up. Please go ahead.
Hi, can I ask just two really brief ones? One, if you've worked in Russian state archives and for these earlier periods when they were using multiple alphabets, how do they list documents in the opposite? And the second question is about Bashkir. As I understand, they're really quite close. Is it sort of a 2-for-1 situation, or are they not that close to one another?
Yeah, okay. The documents in the archive, so I did definitely worked a lot in the archives, and these were mainly Russian language sources. Now I had to go to kind of a separate building, and there you kind of they had a catalog with, they would transliterate the documents into Cyrillic, all right? But then you also relied on the archivists. They are the ones who would kind of find the material for you. So they had like some kind of different catalog system in their brain. So that's why it's so important to know Tatar so that you can talk to them and have tea with them and discuss, you know, where you can find the document. So they're, you know, modern Tatar can be quite helpful. So they would definitely, I mean, depending on the catalog that they have, it could be in the Arabic script, but usually they would have like a transliteration system in the Cyrillic so that you can access these documents in the archives. Now for Bashkir, it's definitely Tatar and Bashkir languages are quite close, and then right now you have a growing, as I mentioned, Tatar Bashkir diaspora in Los Angeles, and so you can and recently I saw that they have developed also some kind of interactive online teaching of the Bashkir language. So Bashkir is also kind of present on the web. And you have, I guess, it's interesting because on as I click, for instance, you do find there is a podcast, and this is a person who is Bashkir and she's speaking in Tatar. So when I was listening, I could hear Bashkir phonetic in the way that she was speaking. So at some point I was thinking, is she speaking Tatar or Bashkir? What's going on here? So I think that depending on where these villages are located, you might have like different levels of language, you see. And even in Tatarstan, you take in Kazan, on Kazan TV, pretty much this is, I would say, the let's say the official literary language, you know, kind of spoken and all that. But then when you go to the villages, you realize that they might speak like a slightly, you know, differently. So you have to kind of get used to new dialects. So, yeah. But definitely you can find also Bashkir material at in Urbana. They have a lot of that, grammars and all this. So if you are interested in the Bashkir language, yeah, definitely you can start with the library at the University of Illinois.
Great. Well, looks like unfortunately we are out of time for more questions. But thank you again, Professor Kefeli. This has been a wonderful talk, and thank you to everyone who attended. Please do keep in touch. In the fall, we will be announcing more iterations of this series. So I hope to see you all again in the future, and thank you very much. Goodbye.
All right, thank you for inviting me.
Thanks.